And so when we left off, of course, Ram and Sita had gotten married, and we saw that King Dasharatha was getting very tired of ruling after these 60,000 years, and he wanted to hand over to his firstborn, he wanted to hand over to Ram. And everybody was very thrilled and excited about this. All of Dasharatha's many wives were excited by this event. And it seemed like Rama's fate was set, that he would go through the coronation, that he would become the great king. But as I mentioned at the end there is a demon that enters the picture, a figure called Mantara. And Mantara is going to tempt one of the wives of Dasharatha called Kaikeyi. And so Kaikeyi takes on a very important role in all of this. Kaikeyi and Dasharatha had produced one of Ram's brothers, Bharat. And although Kaikeyi was very pleased with and showed great affection for Ram and had no thought of it, this servant Mantara is going to tempt her and say, why is it that Ram is getting all of this? Shouldn't Bharat be the one to do so? Why are you not looking out for your child's best interests? And so let's take a look at how this situation goes right on page 73. Kaikeyi cried, "What wonderful news you of all people have brought me today. My son will become the Yuvaraja tomorrow." Mantara flung the priceless thing from her with a growl. She breathed, "Only a fool will rejoice at her son's love for another woman. Don't you see it is Kausalya that he has always loved? While you he keeps to indulge his old body? Oh, what would I tell your mother if I stood before her today? At least think of your son. Think that Bharat will spend the rest of his life as Rama's slave." But Kaikeyi said steadily, "Ram is a prince of Dharma. Why, he loves me more than he does Kausalya. And he loves his brothers so much that Ayodhya shall belong to all 4 princes when Ram is king. He is Dasharatha's eldest son, and when he has ruled for 100 years, he will crown Bharat king." Choking with frustration, Mantara said, "A sea of sorrow has risen to drown you, Kaikeyi, and you don't even see it. After Ram, his son will rule Ayodhya. Bharat will be an underling, a servant, because his mother loves another woman's prince more than her own." And to see the underlying way in which Mantara is trying to play up Kaikeyi to lure her into causing trouble. And so Kaikeyi is going to agree to what Mantara says here, and she becomes a figure of dissension to introduce turmoil into this otherwise perfect situation. Everybody was so happy, and no one saw any problems with it, but along comes this old servant who stirs things up and gets Kaikeyi to go along with it, and now there's all of this turmoil and all of this problem, and this is setting the stage really for everything else that's going to happen within the story. When we look at the figure of Kaikeyi, I think we should read her pretty much the same way that we read the figure of Judas in the story of Christ. Traditionally, Judas is going to be seen as the enemy within the story. But we realize that he was actually necessary to it. He was playing a crucial part in the overall picture of that story. If Judas doesn't turn Christ in, then there is no crucifixion. If there's no crucifixion, there's no resurrection. If there's no resurrection, there's no salvation. And so without him playing that specific part, even though it's a part he's going to be despised for, none of the rest would have unfolded. Well, likewise, when we look at Kaikeyi here, people are going to see her as the enemy. She's the one that starts all of these problems. But her actions are necessary. She has to insist that Bharat take the throne. She has to insist that Ram be cast out into the wilderness, because that's what's going to start the story off, and that's what ultimately is going to lead Ram to his destiny, why he was here. which is to defeat the evil and the corruption of Ravana and to bring, to bring the people back to Dharma, back to righteousness. Anytime that God enters the world, remember Ram is God coming into the world in human form, we'd kind of like to think that it's, for some peaceful reason, that maybe he can sit up there on a throne and rule with a sense of justice, magnificence, but this never happens. Not in Eastern mythology, not in Western, it never occurs that way. Anytime that God sends part of himself into the world, it's because there's a crisis there, because there's a need. He comes into the world to struggle, he comes to suffer, but through enduring that suffering, God is going to pave the way for us to return back to where we should be. When you read the phrase in the Bible that God loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten Son, we know that he was given to suffer, yes. But why? It was to free us from ego, to return us back to Dharma. That's the way it would be perceived from the standpoint of the Ramayana. So Kaikeyi is there to fulfill a very crucial role, a very crucial part, just in the same way that Judas was in the Christian story. Kaikeyi is going to go to the king to fulfill her part in helping Ram ultimately to meet his destiny. Without this seeming betrayal, nothing else that happens could take place. Now Mantara, while she is revealing this information and pushing Kaikeyi towards this action, she also reminds Kaikeyi that she had once saved the king's life, and that he had said, I'm going to offer you 2 boons, 2 gifts, whatever you desire. And she's kept those for all of these years. But now the time has come, according to Mantara, for her to cash in those boons. And so what should they be? Well, the first one, she should ask that the king make Bharat, her son, the king, not Ram. And secondly, the second boon should be used to have Ram banished to the forest for 14 years, so the people will forget him and accept Bharat as their ruler. Because there is this tremendous love and devotion surrounding Ram. As long as he's around in the kingdom, the people are not going to accept anyone else. And so for Bharat to have a chance at governing properly and being king that he should become, we have to get rid of Ram and make the people forget about him. And so let's make Bharat the king, and let's banish Ram to the forest for 14 years. Incidentally, when you read through the text, you see that 14 years all the time, but it's never 14 years. It's always 9 years plus 5. And it's a very bizarre way of writing it. And I've tried to find different reasons or explanations for why they don't just come out and say 14. And I've never found one. But for some reason, it's always 9 years and 5 more is the way they write it. Well, anyway, when Kaikeyi comes to the king and asks for these 2 boons, Dasharatha, he just can't believe what it is that he's heard. He can't believe she would say such a thing. And so he faints. When he comes to, he begs with her, choose anything else. Don't make me do this. But she refuses. And the king faints again. This time he's out all night long. Well, in the meanwhile, knowing that the king has to fulfill the obligation that he made, he has to go along with what she has requested. Kaikeyi is going to call Ram and deliver the news. And let's take a look at how that goes on 82, page 82, over on 83, 82 at the bottom. Kaikeyi said without emotion, I want Bharat to be crowned in your place, and for you to spend 9 years and 5 more in Dadankavana, wearing tree bark and deer skin like a rishi. Her lip curling, she asked, Would you do this to keep your father's honor? For he, I think, will never ask you himself." Dasharat groaned feebly, but Ram's eyes did not so much as flicker. Without a moment's hesitation, he said, "Of course I will go to the forest if you want me to. Why is there such conflict over this? Or that Bharat is to be crowned? It only pains me that my father thought he would hurt me with this happy news. Let us send messengers at once to Kaikeyi to fetch my brother home." Kaikeyi said coldly, "You can leave the sending of messengers to me. You need not be in Ayodhya when Bharat returns. The king is so grief-stricken that one son shall be crowned and not the other, that as long as you are here, he will not make Bharat Yuvaraja. The sooner you leave for the forest, the better." So Ram is, when he gets this news, he's not disturbed at all. Much like Arjuna in the Gita, he has no sense of strong ego, no desire to be governor, to rule, to sit on a throne or anything else. And so, he loves Bharat, he loves his brother, and he's quite happy to have him take the crown. He's pleased by this. And he says, "Hey, I'm glad that you've only called me here because of these boons. It's nothing serious." Ram's not worried about it at all. For the sake of his father's honor, he's gladly going to go into the forest for those 14 years. But now his brother Lakshman is going to be furious at this. And he begins yelling and chastising his father for putting the wants of his wife above the needs of the kingdom, because he understood, better than anyone else who Ram truly was, and what his duty was. Take a look on 87 at the bottom. "Listen to me, Ram. No one, not the people, not the kings of the earth, not even the devas will oppose your being crowned today, by force if need be." But Ram smiled at him and ruffled his hair as one does to a child. He said patiently, "The way of the soul is longer than 14 years in a forest. You want me to sacrifice immortality for a paltry 14 years? No, Lakshman, you are wrong. Calm yourself. Think with your intellect, not your burning heart, and you will see what I must do." So, even though Lakshman wants to fight the situation, wants to see Ram to be crowned, Lakshman is shamed by the words that Ram delivers. And he says, "Well, if you are content to go into the forest for 14 years, I will go with you." And so Ram is going to have Lakshman follow him into the forest. Ram then goes to Sita, and he asks her to stay behind. I mean, after all, the ascetic life that he's going to have to live, the rough life that he's going to have to live in the forest is queen. But Sita has this strength about her, and she refuses to go. "I have been taught that for better or for worse, a wife's dharma is to share her husband's fate. If you have been banished to the Dandankavana, then so have I. I will go with you, Ram. My place is at your side." And so she very strongly puts forward that argument. And there's a little bit of debate that goes into it, but after a while, Ram is going to agree. And on page 91, he says, "You were born to come even into the jungle with me. I was only testing you. You are the rarest woman on earth, and I will take you with me wherever I go. That's our destiny, be together. Let us feed the poor, give alms to our Brahmans, and all our possessions to our servants. Let us go lightly into the jungle." Her face lit up the sun emerging from behind the dark clouds. So they are going to take on the responsibility of going away into the forest to live the life of a hermit of sorts. And so you have Ram, Lakshman, and Sita who are traveling together into the forest. Before they leave, just before they leave, there's a prophecy that's going to be made, and we see this on page 94, about a third of the way from the bottom. "When he saw Sita wearing Valkala, Bathsheba flashed at Kaikeyi in rare anger. You will stop at nothing, will you? You have banished Ram. Let's see to rule from his throne if you want to be forgiven at least part of your sin, or we will all follow Ram to the forest and build another city there. He will rule us, and the forest will be Ayodhya. Fallen queen, your ambition has blinded you to one thing. Bharat will never accept this kingdom that you have won for him with treachery. Shatrugna and he will follow Ram to the jungle. Take my word for it, I know these princes better than you do. And so remember that Bharat, who Kaikeyi's son, and also the other brother, Shatrugna, they are away during all the time. They don't even know that all of this is happening until messages reach them. But it's being prophesied here that, look, you have done all of this stuff to put Bharat on the throne, but he's not going to sit on the throne. When he finds out the treachery that's taken place, he and his brother will also go into the forest, and you will have all four of the brothers there, leaving no one back at home to take over for the king. They will follow Ram anywhere. They will live in the jungle if they have to and make that the new kingdom to be under his control. And this is a very telling prophecy because if you've read ahead, you know that Bharat does get very angry at what his mother has done. He does run off into the forest and try to find Ram. And although he does eventually end up governing, it's more of a regency than it is actually taking control or taking possession.